Well, AMP Chief Economist Shane Oliver issued a dire warning today that housing affordability shows no sign of improvement for potential first home buyers, and in fact, it's only getting worse. Despite rising interest rates, which would typically cause a softening of property prices due to there being less money floating around, house prices have continued to increase this year. Prices in Sydney, for instance, are up 6.4% so far this year. Units are up 5.1%, and economists at the Commonwealth Bank predict prices will have increased 10% by the time the year is out. Compare that to many of the predictions we heard earlier in the year, which were that there would be a 10% decrease. The Daily Telegraph has launched a special series called War on the Home Front, looking at the housing and rental crisis in New South Wales. Now, the stories of renters struggling to keep up with rising costs and young people feeling powerless to enter the market will similarly echo around the country. Dr. Oliver told the Telegraph that there's an element of disbelief about the way the market has changed, and young home buyers have been hit by a quote-unquote double whammy of rising interest rates and a growing market. To quote Dr. Oliver, "I don't think there's a period in history where things have changed that dramatically in such a short space of time." And according to him, a lot of this comes down to a massive increase in migration. He said, quote, "You've had this huge surge in population when property markets were already tight, which has led to an even worse supply-side shortfall and swamped the negative impact from higher interest rates." Some 900,000 people are set to enter the country within 2 years, according to the federal government. Now, we're told we need these people to fill important jobs, that the country would be up the creek without them. But the reality is that every time we import more people into the country, we create more jobs. We need people to build the houses for them to live in, people to man the supermarket checkouts, teach their kids, cook their meals. More people equals more jobs. And we end up in this endless kind of loop, chasing our tail in order to fill all these jobs. So you bring in more people and the cycle starts again, and on it goes. Australia's net migration is projected to be 20% higher than any other comparable country. According to the Telegraph, we're set to take on more foreign millionaires than any other country this year. And they, of course, are the people who can afford to buy up Australian property. And as former Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe noted last month, migration has significantly outstripped the growth in housing supply. He told the Standing Committee on Economics, quote, "The population of Australia is up 2.5% this year. As I said before, the number of dwellings is up 1.5%. So with strong demand relative to supply, rents go up, and when rents go up, prices tend to go up." The result of all of that is that ordinary working Australians, particularly young Australians, are being sold up the creek. Higher migration, particularly when it involves skilled workers who can earn higher incomes, serves the government's goals because it creates more taxpayers and helps contribute to their aim of eternal economic growth. But those battling away, hoping they can one day own their own home, end up worse off. And if economic policy is not fundamentally serving the people, it is bad economic policy. In these discussions, I often come back to a speech John Howard gave to the Business in Europe luncheon in London in 2000. He told the guests, quote, "It is important for all of us, whether we're in business or in politics, all of us who are concerned about the future of our society and the cohesion of our society, whether it be here in Australia or in Britain, to remember that economic policy, however you define it and however you pursue it, is never some end in itself. That the purpose of economic policy is to provide a social dividend to achieve social goals. Personal contentment and human fulfilment and the stability and cohesion of society are the ultimate goals of sound economic policy." Howard also described on many other occasions what he called the human dividend of economic policy. At the launch of his 2004 campaign, he said that running the economy well only has a purpose if it delivers a human dividend, if it delivers things for the Australian people. It has to benefit us, in other words. And on the basis of the numbers we see in the housing market, it's hard to argue that drastically increasing our migrant intake for economic purposes is delivering a human dividend. It's not delivering personal contentment and human fulfilment and the stability and cohesion of society when it is actively locking young and low-income Australians out of the housing market and driving up rents. And sure, the federal government and state governments have unveiled plans to boost housing stock. The Albanese government wants there to be 1.2 million new houses built in the next 5 years. But how will they actually make it happen? According to the ABS, 985,085 public and private houses were built in the 5 years to March 2022. So more than 200,000 extra homes have to be built in the same time period, at a time when insolvencies in the construction sector have almost doubled in some states. Between March 2022 and March this year, the number of private sector dwellings that began construction dropped by 6.6%. And this is just simple supply and demand. The government has dramatically increased demand and they've done nothing about supply, and we are now all paying for that. This is a space where the coalition ought to start appealing to would-be home buyers that higher migration is bad for their hip pockets and prosperity. The opposition is now sensibly calling for cuts to migration. We simply cannot keep up with the number of people currently entering the country. And if you want Australian people to remain content, you have to give them something to believe in, something to take ownership of. Without their own property, they lose connection to their country. They can't afford it. Many young people feel like they can't afford to start a family, so they lose that connection too. If the ALP would rather pursue immigration instead of standing up for the battlers, then there's a ready-made hole for the coalition to fill. Well, new polling today has again shown that support for the voice to Parliament is on the slide, with Newspoll finding just 36% support for the referendum and 56% opposition. An Australian Financial Review poll today also found just 33% support for the voice. Now, it's a horror situation for the Yes campaign, with just 3 weeks to go until polling day. Now, I suspect the actual result will be closer than polling currently suggests. But if the Yes campaign is to get up from here, it would be a Herculean effort. Not only because the national support is so low, but because support amongst young people is also on the slide. Support among those in the 18 to 34 age bracket is now at 50% compared to about 70% at the start of the year. It's the only age group that still shows overall support for the voice, and with them in decline, it's hard to see how it can get over the line. A positive national result basically rides on those young voters. And beyond that, the latest state-by-state polling found Tasmania was the only state with majority support for the voice. And of course, you need to win at least 4 states for the vote to get up on the basis of a double majority. But interestingly, today's news poll has also found that the unpopularity of the voice seemingly has little bearing on the popularity of the government. On a two-party preferred basis, the government is up a point to 54%, and its primary vote is also up a point to 36%. Anthony Albanese's popularity inched just back into positive territory, while Peter Dutton's slid to -20. Perhaps this has something to do with the fact that a Redbridge poll on the weekend found just 6% of people included the voice in their 3 most important issues. Unsurprisingly, cost of living, housing affordability and the economy and jobs were the top 3 issues. After the distraction of the voice is gone, they are the things the Albanese government will have to prove its mettle on. Meanwhile, sensing that things aren't perhaps as clean-cut as they once were, Albanese now says if the voice gets up, he'll invite Dutton to be part of the process.
If there is a yes vote in the referendum, then I will convene a parliamentary committee, a joint parliamentary committee. I will ask for there to be chairs, joint chairs, one from Labor, one from the coalition, and try to secure maximum support.
Let's be very frank about it. The Prime Minister's playing political games here. This is an 11th hour desperation move to try and salvage the yes vote. And I don't believe it's going to work because people don't see the Prime Minister as being sincere. He's not sincere when he says that this is just a modest change. Australians know that that's not the truth.